Before I begin, I'd like to take a brief moment to thank Lisa Nixon for inviting me here today and for presenting me with the opportunity to share my story with all of you. It truly is an honor for me to be here. Not only is this officially my first visit to Canada, even though I just creeped across the border, but at the same time, as many of you that may have read my book might know, a great deal of my journey with Parkinson's has been about making connections. So to have the opportunity to connect with a group such as yours, this is truly a treat for me. As I mentioned, I'm here to share my story. My book, Tremors in the Universe, is my story about my life with Parkinson's so far. But more than that, it's a story about my perspective on life, about my vision, about how I choose to see things on a day-to-day basis. It's a story about taking charge over Parkinson's through my thoughts and my actions, and how I've directed my life through the choices I make and the attitude that I bring to each and every day. But why share my story? Well, stories are an important part of our lives. Stories give rise to our imaginations. Stories can change our attitudes, opinions, and behaviors, and even inspire us. Let me give you a quick example. There once was an old man who would get up every morning to take a walk along the beach. This one day, when he got up and he started walking on the beach, he noticed a young man off in the distance who was dancing. As he approached the young man, he quickly learned that he wasn't dancing at all. What he was doing was he was bending down to the beach, picking up small crabs that had washed up onto the shore, and he was throwing them back into the ocean. "What are you doing?" said the old man to the young boy. The young boy said, "I'm throwing these crabs back into the sea. If I don't, they'll surely die." The old man looked down around the young man's feet and saw what must have been 100 crabs, and they stretched for as long as the eye could see down the beach. "There must be 1,000,000 of them," the old man said to the young boy. "You can't possibly make a difference." And with that, the young boy bent down, picked up another crab, and threw it as far as he could into the ocean. And he turned to the old man and he said, "It made a difference for that one." That story, that short story, epitomizes why I'm here to tell you mine. If telling my story makes a difference in one person's life, then for me it's all worth it. Stories also connect us to each other. They help form a sense of community. They also help us give insight into the human condition. They create empathy. In other words, stories help us to care. But the sad truth is, there's also another side to stories. How many of us in our lives have had the stories that we tell ourselves, or the stories we've been telling ourselves since we were children, let those limit us as to who we are and who we might become? Or how many of us have allowed the stories that other people tell us to limit who we might become and limit our potential? Stories like, "You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not capable enough. You have Parkinson's." If we're not careful, the stories that we tell ourselves and the stories we choose to tell others, not to mention the stories we choose to hear from others, can limit our behavior and limit our imagination and eventually become our beliefs. It's my hope today that my story is not one that limits you, but rather one that opens you up to your limitless possibilities. Some refer to me as a motivational speaker. I prefer to think of myself as a motivated speaker. That's because when I was diagnosed 5 years ago with Parkinson's, it actually changed my life for the better. You see, the challenge of Parkinson's disease, which is what I choose to see it as, a challenge, taught me that true wellness doesn't come from a pill or a procedure. It doesn't exist in my physical body. It exists in my mind and in my heart. For me, wellness is a state of my being. It's my attitude. It's how I view my life. Being diagnosed with Parkinson's has shown me that although my life may not be perfect, it can still be filled with purpose. And for me, that starts by believing that my Parkinson's didn't happen to me, my Parkinson's happened for me. Again, it's perception, it's how you choose to look at things in life. I wonder how many people here today would say that they are living their lives exactly as they imagine them to be. Think about that for a second. Are you living your life as you imagine it to be? If you're like most people, and your answer is based off of where you are now in your life compared to a dream you may have had when you were much younger, then your answer is probably no. After all, things change over time. Why, when I was 6 or 7, I imagined being a fireman when I grew up. Yet if you were to look at my bio or my resume now, you'd think I totally missed the mark. As I was introduced, I'm a designer. I've owned my own design business for 29 years now. I'm an author of a book. I'm a licensed massage therapist and a shaman. A designer, an author, a massage therapist, and a shaman. I don't know if that sounds like an eclectic resume or the beginnings of a really good bar joke. But what if your answer was based off of your day-to-day imagination? The imagination that we use to shape our realities, our perceptions, and our attitudes, that ultimately defines the quality of life you end up living. Then I think you discover, as I have, that we all do live our lives exactly as we imagine them to be, and that there's unexpected power in your imagination. It all depends on how you choose to use it. In 2008, I had imagined that within the next 2 years I could be in the best shape of my life. It was a birthday present I wanted to give myself when I turned 50, because to me, 50 was going to be big. So I enrolled at a local gym, hired a personal trainer, and for the next 2 years I lifted weights, I crunched my abs, I did sit-ups and push-ups and pull-ups, until frankly I wanted to throw up. But you know what? It worked. At the age of 50, I was in the best shape of my life. And then one day I was running on the treadmill, and something didn't feel right. My left leg felt heavy, fatigued, and I thought if I continue running at this pace, I'm going to trip and fall flat on my face. So I reached up and I slowed the machine down to a comfortable level, and I finished my workout. The next day I came back to the gym, fully anticipating to resume my normal pace, only to discover the same sensations all over again. Now I'm thinking, well, maybe I tweaked a muscle, and my body's just trying to tell me to slow down, take it easy. So I accommodated. But what transpired over the next 9 months was far from recuperating. I began a slow downward spiral, both physically and mentally, and I began an exhaustive search throughout the medical community for the answers as to what was going wrong. Then on July 12th of 2012, at the age of 52, my search finally ended. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And boy, if anything will wake up your imagination, it's facing the unknown of a life-altering diagnosis, whether it's Parkinson's or any other chronic disease. When I wrote Tremors in the Universe, a big part of that book is recounting stories from my youth, from my childhood, stories that gave me strength in terms of how to deal with things as an adult. I honestly believe that the things we learn as children, we tend to put back to bed and forget about. But in that pureness and that innocence of our childhood, oftentimes comes a lot of strength that we can bring to play in our adult life. I'd like to read that one chapter in the book that has to do with my dealing with my diagnosis of Parkinson's. The chapter is called, "What Are You Afraid of?" Growing up as the younger of two children, there was very little I was capable of doing that my older brother could not. After all, he was 4 years older than me, which meant he was far bigger, stronger, and more experienced. Being much taller, my brother had the enviable ability to pass the 48-inch height requirement that allowed him to ride the roller coasters, while I was usually summoned to the pink pony on the carousel. So you can imagine my pride as the baby of the family in knowing that there was something I could do that my brother could not. What was the talent that had my brother at a 6-year-old's mercy? I could walk the full length of an unlit hallway in our house, unescorted, for the unheard of distance of 50 feet to turn on the light in our bedroom. Walk, mind you, not run. That's right, my older brother was afraid of the dark. Every night, when my parents would tell us to go to bed, my brother would turn to me and say, "Come on, Bob, let's go to bed," and then proceed to either push me ahead of him down the hall or just outright ask me to go ahead and turn the light on for him. And I did it. I did it every time. I took incredible pride in just being able to do that one small thing because it gave me such a sense of accomplishment to do something that he could not. But here's the funny part. I was afraid of the dark too. Unbeknownst to my brother, I was as equally afraid of the dark. But rather than letting that paralyze me, I turned it into a personal challenge for myself. You see, as much as I feared going down that hall, I repeatedly kept telling myself that if I could just do this one thing, maybe he might have a new level of respect for me, that he might look up to me even though I was much smaller. I had given myself a purpose for overcoming my fears. But it took more than just having a goal to succeed at my challenge. It took some strategy and creative thought as well. In addition to my thoughts about the possible outcome, I also kept a very strong focus on the fact that I wasn't alone. After all, my parents were just right down the hall in the other room, and my brother was 10 feet behind me. But every time, I ultimately succeeded in navigating my way through the darkness to find the light. Over time, it not only became easier for me, but eventually it became easier for my brother too, until finally he no longer needed me to lead the way anymore. He had the confidence to do it himself. I find it very interesting that a fear of the dark is one of the earliest and most common childhood fears. It is understandably frightening to a child's developing mind. At that early age, we crave security, comfort, and safety in a world we're just coming to know. The darkness represents the unknown, the things we cannot see. And when we don't have anything real or tangible, we're left only with our imaginations. And for some reason, we always imagine the worst. We imagine monsters, demons, and boogeymen. But are they there? No. Our imagination creates our own fears. In essence, we're left to overcome our own imaginations. We can choose to imagine the worst, or we can choose to imagine the best. Courage, to me, is the strength to imagine something better in the face of your fears. The darkness associated with the unknown is not just limited to adolescence. Quite the contrary. Adults often allow the fear of the unknown to limit our ability to live happy and fulfilling lives, all because we don't have the courage to imagine the existence of angels within the darkness. Instead, we give more thought to fantasies of demons, monsters, and boogeymen. We're conditioned to need proof that everything will be okay, rather than being able to trust that there is good in both the darkness and in the light. The expression seeing is believing fortifies that notion that until you are shown the facts or the proof of a situation, there is nothing for you to be sure of. Until the light is turned on, there is no way to know what's in store for you. I feel the more poignant expression is believing as seeing, which means that we create our own realities or the things we see in our life by the way we choose to believe. When I was given a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, the lights were immediately turned off, and I was plunged into total darkness. The same type of darkness I had to walk into as a child to turn on the light, because the darkness of Parkinson's is also filled with unknowns. I didn't know what to expect, and I was left only with my imagination about what could be in store for me. Will it be monsters, demons, and boogeymen? I decided early on that I wasn't going to let the diagnosis paralyze me. I chose to believe that I could see a different outcome. I began to imagine that the best actually existed in this place where I could see absolutely nothing, that was completely foreign to me. And you know what? I was afraid. I am afraid. So I did the only thing I know how to do to face my fears. I gave myself a challenge. I challenged myself to imagine goodness in the dark. I gave myself the choice to believe it, and I'll see it. And so for all these years, I continue to write, learn, discover, and most of all, put all my belief in a better outcome with Parkinson's. By taking a positive attitude, I'll see positive results. Taking this path of courage isn't something that no one else has ever done, but it's most definitely been about showing others that they can do it too. Anyone can make the choice to be happy. With each chapter I write, I walk down that hall again, and I turn on the light. It's my way of repeatedly reminding myself that there is goodness that exists in the dark. My heart, my soul, and my spirit are the lights that allow me to see it. And you know what? I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it brighter than ever. Researchers have a really interesting term for what our brains do when we're facing the unknown. They call it awfulizing. When we're faced with the unknown, our brain and our fears choose to replace it with something awful. Under the warped logic of fear, anything is better than the uncertain. Fear fills that void of the unknown at all costs, convincing you to believe that your dread is what you know, offering up the worst in the place of the ambiguous and substituting assumptions for actual reason. But with the awareness that your brain is doing that comes the strength and the opportunity to change that. It's in those critical moments when you realize that you have that choice, the choice to imagine the worst or the choice to imagine the best. For me, back in my neurologist's office in 2012, as I sat and faced the unknown of a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, a surprising thing happened. My reaction wasn't at all what most people would come to expect. As I sat there, a surprising calm washed over me, as if I had been out in the cold for a long period of time and suddenly a good Samaritan came along and draped a warm blanket around my shoulders. I felt incredibly at peace. And then in the quiet of my thoughts, I heard what I honestly consider to be a miracle. I heard a voice. It was a voice that whispered from deep inside of me that said everything was going to be okay, that the power was in me for my own healing, and that true wellness comes from within. It starts by believing that everything happens for a reason in life, that my Parkinson's wasn't a punishment being inflicted upon me, but rather an opportunity for personal growth. You see, the only fact that doctors could give me was I had Parkinson's disease. They couldn't tell me with any certainty how it was going to progress, which symptoms I'd have to endure, and which ones I would not. As far as I was concerned, this was a disease left entirely up to my imagination. Given that, I chose to imagine the best possible outcome. Why would I choose anything less? Why would anyone? In everything in life, we always have a choice. Again, you can choose to imagine the worst, or you can choose to imagine the best. But ultimately, what we choose to do with our lives and our imaginations is what makes us who we are. There really are no rules on how you have to see things. Our interpretations of our world and our experiences with life are completely up to each and every one of us. I just happen to choose to believe in the best possible outcome. And in doing so, I gave meaning to my Parkinson's, and I was able to empower myself. I started writing. I started writing a blog that was eventually published as my book in 2014. Writing gave voice to my Parkinson's, and it allowed me to share with others my belief that we all are the architects of our own lives. Additionally, it allowed me to share with my 3 children my outlook on life. And lastly, it allowed me to share with others facing challenges in their life the hopes that it might help make their journey a little easier. From there, I wanted to empower myself. I wanted to take an active role in managing the disease, and I wanted to give back. And as it was introduced for me, that started with joining the Michael J. Fox Foundation as a 5-year clinical trial participant in the PPMI study, which is to isolate a biomarker for Parkinson's disease. I've since extended that program with them for another 3 years for some additional investigation that they're looking into. Additionally, I joined forces with the National Parkinson's Foundation to help raise awareness and funds for research and care. And my team, the Martini Shakers, has raised well over $60,000 now in 5 years. And that's come from really grassroots efforts with my friends, personal friends, and business colleagues. And the outpouring of support for Parkinson's disease has been amazing. For me, imagination comes down to vision, perspective, outlook, a way of looking at life with love in my heart, rather than fear that makes it possible to face life's challenges. Whether it's Parkinson's or another challenge, and successfully move past them and continue moving forward. And it comes down to choice. The choice is ultimately mine, and the choice is ultimately yours. You can choose fear, or you can choose love. I choose to believe that every event in my life has a purpose for me. And while I can't control all the events in my life, I can control the experience with them. I believe that our thoughts are energy, and our thoughts give rise to our realities. What we choose to believe, therefore, we give life to. If I had chose to believe from the very beginning that Parkinson's disease would be the end-all for me, then for me it would have been. And any suffering I would experience as a result of Parkinson's would be the result of my choice to perceive it as such. But I refuse to believe that, and I refuse to see my Parkinson's that way. If Parkinson's disease beats me, stops me, breaks my will, and keeps me from moving forward in life, it will only be because I chose to allow it to. I had the great fortune of being able to attend the World Parkinson's Congress this past year in Portland. I was invited as a guest speaker for my book and an author in resident. And this was a display that was put up in the center of the exhibition hall. and it was done by a Norwegian photographer. And around a big expanse that went all the way around the exhibition hall, he had various pictures of Parkinson's patients in various occupations in life. And it was about the impression of what a Parkinson's patient is. And the reason I took this picture is because if you notice there to my side, there's an illustration there. And this is the beginning of the display. And when you look closely at the illustration, it's an illustration that was created 130 years ago to depict the Parkinson's patient. It's still on the internet now. If you Google or do an internet search on Parkinson's disease, this is the picture that shows up. I could have chose to accept the story of Parkinson's disease that's been written over all the years and all its expectations and let that be the story of my life. I could choose to accept the stories that my friends had wanted to write for me, defined by their expectations of Parkinson's disease, and let that be the story of my life. Or I could write my own story, where my imagination sees beyond my fears, regardless of everything else. I chose the latter. This is my life, and I choose to live it the way I want to live it, Parkinson's and all. Each day I wake up, I have 24 hours, nothing more. I live each day for what that day can be for me, and what I do in that 24 hours will determine where I will be tomorrow. The 24 hours can either break my life or make my life. I live each day with attitude and gratitude. I give thanks not only for the things I do have, but more importantly, I give thanks for the things that are still to come. Because I believe in my heart that when you live your life in gratitude for the things to come, you live your life with positive expectations. Our imaginations give rise to our thoughts, and our thoughts create our realities. You are what you think. When you change your thoughts, you can change your life. I am so much more than the challenge of Parkinson's disease. You all are much more. We all have to face challenges. If you're in this room and you're not being challenged because of Parkinson's disease or anything else in your life, odds are really good you're going to be challenged at some time in the near future. That doesn't mean you need to live your life in fear of what may or may not lie just around the corner. On the contrary, if you can live your life one day at a time with faith in your heart that everything will work out in the end, you can persevere. And if I can offer any words of encouragement for those of you that are facing challenges, it would be these. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, smarter than you think, and loved more than you know. I'm urging you not to just go through your Parkinson's, but grow through your Parkinson's. Get involved. Become a part of a clinical trial. Fundraise for awareness and research. Make your Parkinson's make a difference not only in your life, but in the life of others. If at the end of your life you saw that all your struggles, pain, and tears over Parkinson's saved the life of another person, ask yourself, would it all have been worth it? Each of us gets to write the story that is our life. You are the book, you are the pages, you are the pen, and you are the author. Tell your story the way you want your life told. You can make your life a living, breathing work of art. The choice is up to you. Like the story of the young man throwing the crabs back into the sea, will you be the old man with a narrow vision and perspective on life? Or will you be the young man who sees the potential in the smaller things that you can still do with your life to make a difference for others? We're all going to have roadblocks and failures. We may never get all the crabs back in the sea. but each of us can continue to make a difference with our lives, regardless of Parkinson's, through each little effort we make. After all, it just takes a little imagination. Thank you.